The question is, do you agree that Scotland should be an independent country?
For me, the principle that we work best when we work together.
Well, they didn't.
Very serious.
The referendum. It seems to me that they're not dealing with the issues.
Hello, this is Scottish Independence podcast number 68, and this is another episode where some speeches from a campaign event that took place recently. This event took place in Motherwell just a couple of weeks ago, and I think you'll really enjoy it. Fortunately for me, this time the event had a compere, so I don't need to introduce them all individually as someone does that for you. So this time I won't even have a wee word with you at the end. Speak to you next time.
I just want to hand you over now to the chairman for the evening. It's John Milligan. He is the stalwart of the Lanarkshire Forum for Independence. And have a good time, everybody, and take it away, John. Thanks.
Thanks, Alan. I don't know about that stalwart, but this is one of those occasions where the child is the father of the man. In respect of the younger guys in the town here who decided to kick this initiative off, and fair play to them. And it's a pleasure and a privilege to be associated with the campaign. But I want to open my remarks tonight, ladies and gentlemen, to pay a comment or two about, as you know, Bob Crow was invited a guest here, the General Secretary of the RNT Trade Union, who tragically and suddenly passed away just 3 weeks ago at the early age of 52 years. And true to our traditional hospitality, we believe it appropriate that from this meeting tonight we send condolences to Bob's partner Nicky, his children and grandchildren, family and friends, and extend our best wishes to members of the RNT Trade Union, and I'm one of them, who have lost an inspirational leader. But Bob's advocacy on behalf of working people was not confined to acting solely for members of the RMT. He believed in justice and fairness for ordinary men and women at home and throughout the world. He practiced his trade unionist, anti-fascist and socialist beliefs in his commitment to lend solidarity and support wherever it was needed. Attending his funeral last Monday, you could see and actually feel the high regard in which he was held, because people recognised that here was a guy who had taken up the challenge on their behalf. Trade unionists from England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales and across the world joined with pensioners' groups, campaigners against austerity, campaigners against nuclear weapons, campaigners against wars, individual citizens, solidarity groups on behalf of Cuba, Venezuela, Palestine and the rest were there to pay tribute. See, Bob understood completely where the source of the problem for working people lay. And he took the challenge to the establishment with courage and conviction. You could even say he was audacious, a word used by Jim Sillars in his book In Place of Fear 2, saying that if we are to succeed, we too must be audacious. Bob knew the source of the problem, the Westminster Consensus and its support for the failed economic model. That is why he embraced the cause which we are discussing tonight, the cause of Scottish independence. His position was that an independent Scotland, taking the opportunity to build a more just and equitable society, would act as a beacon to the rest of Britain, and as such would be in the interest of solidarity with working people throughout these islands and abroad. But Bob was no stranger to Scotland, and in recent times was an enthusiastic supporter of the Scottish independence, as our union conducted a consultation on the issue with our members at meetings throughout the country, declaring that if he lived in Scotland, he would vote yes on the 18th of September. A position he would no doubt have conveyed tonight. He had visited Motherwell many times, and the last time I spoke to him was on the eve of his death. He was really looking forward to coming here and being involved in the debate. We have lost a true comrade and friend. But in many respects, he is here. He is here. His legacy to continue this struggle. I know that he would have completely accepted and endorsed the words, "Don't mourn, organise." Don't mourn, organise. And that's what we'll be doing tonight. Putting the case, looking to convince, and going forward, organising for an independent Scotland. These will be the views of Bob Crow, and it's a privilege to know them. Just to go on to the business of the evening, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting is open to all, decided or undecided. We trust that we will have an informative, forthright and open discussion, as Alan has indicated, within which we can engage on the issues surrounding the referendum vote. The topic tonight, independence, is not an end in itself, because the meeting tonight is an opportunity for all of us, not only to hear why we should have an independent Scotland, but also what that independent Scotland can bring. What opportunities come with the power of an independent Scotland? How can we develop a more fair and just society? How can we use the material resources of the country in combination with the intelligence of its people so that future generations can prosper? What are the consequences of a no vote on the 18th of September? Jim Sillars comments in his book that, I quote, independence does not mean more of the same, with the only difference being that the saltire flies alone on public buildings instead of alongside the Union flag. Robin McAlpine, under the title All of Us First, argues the concept and opportunities through the commonweal. The commonweal is an old Scots phrase, as you know, which means well shared in common and the well-being of all. And Cat Boyd campaigns under the Radical Independence Campaign slogan of another Scotland is possible. And these panel of speakers will get an opportunity in a second or two to convey all that entails. So the format of the meeting just now then is each of the speakers will have 10 to 15 minutes to make their presentation, and then we will open up the meeting to a questions and answer session, at the conclusion of which the speakers will have 5 minutes each to wind up. And we will conclude on Wednesday morning at 10:30. I told Jimmy to bring a big piece of money, but we'll conclude at a reasonable time, put it that way. So I'm going to call the first speaker, and when we get to the question and answer session, please bear in mind I've been advised by the technical guys that wait till you get the microphone, the mobile microphone in front of you, before you ask your question, so they can pick the sound up. Because they're going worldwide, you'll be famous by tomorrow morning. So the first speaker I'm going to call upon is Robin McAlpine. Robin is the director of the Jimmy Reid Foundation and editor of the Labour Left Review. A very busy guy, and a number of meetings that Robin's doing and the other colleagues here tonight would make you blush. I remember going over to Blantyre quite recently, and he had a meeting starting at 7:30, and he had a meeting at Stonehouse at 7:30 as well. Now, I don't know how. I listened to him very well, and he was done well, but I don't know how he got to. I didn't know there was a time barrier between him and Blantyre, and he went back the way when he got to Stonehouse. Although some people argue that's the case, but anyway. That's not the case at all. But anyway, I'm going to bring up Robin and to make his presentation. Thank you very much.
I would never have made it to Stonehouse if it wasn't for my helicopter. But before I start, I just want to say one very simple thing about Bob Crow. The left have lots of people that can make a good speech. We can never have enough people that win for working people. And that's why I think Bob Crow is an important figure for us not to forget, because he could talk, but he could win. And it's time that we started winning. The reason it's time we started winning is because we've been losing for far too long. There was one day last year, I'm going to sit down with my calendar and try and work out exactly when it was, but there was one day last year when the time that Britain spent building up its welfare state was overtaken by the time that Britain has spent undoing its welfare state. From 1945 to 1979, we built a country which was decent for the people, the working people that lived in it. We built a welfare state. We changed the economy. We tackled poverty seriously. We tackled poor housing seriously. We changed the lives of the people of this country for good. And since 1979, everything we did, nationalisation, getting rid of means testing, universalism, public services investment, making sure that there's good quality rental housing for people. All of those things have been consistently undone ever since, which is why I get so sick to the back teeth of another pious lecture from somebody in Better Together telling me to stay in Britain so that the broadest shoulders can carry the burden. The only burden the broadest shoulders seem to me to be carrying is bags full of money. Because I can't see what the hell they're contributing to the lives of the vast majority of people in this country just now with their tax dodging and their lack of participation and the way that they distort the political process. It's no good enough. And we've all come to believe that it's normal, that it's usual, that it's like this. Well, let's have a look and see what normal actually looks like and how normal Britain is. So, a working person in Britain, they will be in the second lowest paid economy of all the advanced economies in the world. They'll be working the third longest hours of anyone in Europe. And of all the countries in Europe, there's only 3 countries where the wages of a working person have fallen faster since the economic crisis than in Britain. If you're a woman, you're in a country with the 8th biggest gap between male and female earnings. You're paying the highest cost for childcare. If you're a pensioner, you've got the lowest pension in Europe and you're the third most likely to be in poverty. If you're a child, you will be in the country where children in a WHO survey came absolutely bottom of the league table of developed nations for happiness. That's the reality of what we created with this Britain that we've been building for the last 35 years. That Britain is based on the belief that only the biggest and the strongest have any right to win. And if they win, the rest of us ought to be glad. If you put 2 people in a room in Britain and one of them comes out alive, that person must be the best that we can possibly have. And it's destroying our society and it's destroying our lives. And we can't stand about any longer looking at this and saying it's all right. Because one of the other things that Britain does is it tries to make you believe that that's how it is and there's nothing we can do anymore. Oh, it's a global trend. Oh, it's international phenomena that are causing this. It's not. I've just shown you in a few simple statistics how bad Britain is compared to everybody else. How poor life is in Britain for ordinary working people compared to even countries like Bulgaria and Romania where the pension's better than ours. They've got happier kids than us in these countries. You're less likely to end up in pension or poverty if you live in Estonia than you are here. So it's time we woke up to the reality of what Britain has become. And it's also time that we woke up to the reality of what Scotland could be. Now, one thing I'm going to say here, Britain could be this too. Britain could turn itself round if there was even a modicum of the will among the politicians in Britain to do anything about it. But there isn't. Because they're all bought into one belief that a political philosophy that says let the biggest win is the only way that you can move forward as a society. It's not. You can have me-first politics. We've had me-first politics for 40 years and we all came second. It's time that we had politics that put all of us first. And that's what Commonwealth's about. So, how do you do it? Because I want to focus everybody's mind in one question, which is, we've heard a lot about the kind of country, and I'm wabbling my fingers about like this, because it all seems hell of a vague to me, the kind of country of fairness and decency that everyone says they want to have. I hear very little from the other side about what that actually entails, what you're actually going to do to make that country happen. And so I'm going about every meeting that anyone invites me to come to say the following things. We know what the people say they want from their lives. We know what we need to do to give them that. We have all the knowledge and the expertise in this country that we need. We have all the resources and all the wealth in this country to do that we need. And we have, in my view, an absolutely strong and undeniable political majority that means if we can get our country back, who's going to stop us from doing these things? So, what do people say they want? Meaningful work. I mean, this is so important. Meaningful work. Not the money. The sense that when you get up in the morning and you go to your work, you can feel proud about yourself because you're doing something worthwhile. A home, somewhere to live, somewhere nice to be. Security, the knowledge at the end of the month you can feed your family, that you can pay your bills. Your health, a sense of community, a sense that you're living with people that care, that you can care about, that you're part of something. That's more or less all that people say they want. And why can they not have it? Because it's too expensive, apparently. Too expensive. You can't afford the public services, the social investment, the economy which would give them this stuff. We can't afford it. Well, we bloody can. And I'll tell you how we can. We can by being not the lowest paid, second lowest paid economy among the advanced economies. So somebody will hear me say this before. Imagine what a decent salary that would let you have that life is, that meaningful work, that home, that security. You can pay your bills, you can participate, you're not relying on tax credits. What would that salary be? £25,000 to £35,000? Well, of everybody in Scotland today who's working, only 1 in 5 earns between £25,000 and £35,000. 3 out of 5 working Scots earn less than £25,000 a year, and half of everybody in working Scotland at the end of this year won't have made £21,000. We wonder why we can't afford our public services when we've got people that can't afford to live without tax credits. We've got a low-pay economy. And if it wasn't like that, it would be substantially different for all of us. We've got a paper on our website. I always forget to tell people the websites. readfoundation.org is where you'll find all of our papers, and the Commonweal website is allofusfirst.org, where all those papers are translated into language which is perhaps a little easier to understand. Some of them are quite technical. But we took this paper and we said, let's try and find out what this low-pay economy means to everybody. And we said, let's not imagine that we've grown the economy. The economy gets no bigger. But we distribute the wages in that economy fairly in the way that they do in a Nordic country. So we took away the massive pay at the top, we got rid of the low pay in the middle, we compressed the pay so it was flatter, and we got the number of people into work that you have in a Nordic country, the low levels of unemployment. We did just that. And we ran the tax model again, and it generates £4 billion of additional income without touching tax rates. We don't have a problem with too much public expenditure. We have a problem with too low wages in the pockets of our people. And why? And why is that? Because we allow this conflict model, this bully model, to be the dominant model of everything that we do. So if somebody can build a shed in a field and buy lots of cheap retail goods from China and fill that shed and sell them to you, and if in the process that out-of-town shopping centre can close down all your high streets, you should be glad. You should be delighted because the biggest guy won, and that's what's good for you. Or if you're a youngster, try to get on the property ladder, buy your first house. You'll presumably be delighted that 7 out of the 10 richest people in this country are property developers who got rich by controlling the land on which houses are built to push house prices higher and higher so that they get rich and you don't. Or perhaps you'll be delighted at our banking sector, which we've even found now. I've got to say the Libor scandal was horrendous, but there's something almost worse to discover, that some of our banks were deliberately bankrupting small businesses so that they could sell off their assets for a rapid profit. I mean, I find that truly genuinely disgusting. We've got an economy which makes its money from your pockets, because retail doesn't make value, it just takes value from you. And property doesn't make value, it takes value from you and your rents. And the banking sector hasn't been making value, it's been taking value out of you through exploitation. And all these jobs, all these wealth-grabbing jobs, industries, they don't create good jobs because you don't need skills to do any of these things. If you're using an exploitative economy in which all you've got to do is put a Chinese t-shirt on a shelf and get somebody to buy it for twice the price you paid for it, you don't have to pay anybody because that's not skilled. It's an extremely useful industry if you want to make yourself a lot of money in your corporation, and it's an absolutely rubbish industry if you want to feed your family. And we need to change that. We need to build an economy which is not based in low-pay, exploitative jobs, but which is built on high-pay, productive jobs, because Britain is a country in denial about its economic situation. We are 16 percentage points behind the average productivity of an advanced economy. We have desperately low rates of innovation. Our balance of trade is terrible. These old measures of economic health, productivity, how much you make, balance of trade, how much you sell, innovation, how much better you get, these measures don't even get discussed in Britain now. All we talk about is an economy based on high street footfall and house prices. It's madness. We have got to get out of this corrosive, psychotic system which measures your success by how well the rich do, how well the corporations do, how well the big do. That's no future for us. That's no future for any of us. We have to build a productive economy. Because when you make things, and when you do things, and when you create the value in your economy, not simply by marking up what something else did, but through what we do, what we build with our hands, then suddenly that economy is an economy where you pay people. Because when you make value, and when you create things, and when you build things, it's your skill that adds the value. It's the worker's skill that makes the wealth in the economy. And when it's skill that creates wealth, you pay people because they're worth paying. We have to move from one economy to another, and the City of London will never let us do it. It is not good enough for anybody down there to say, well, we'd like to have a high-pay economy, or we'd like to have a productive economy, because even if they were serious, they wouldn't get the permission from the City of London. But we can here. We have to do what people do when they want to change their economy and make it better. We need an industrial policy. We need a policy that says the economy is not beyond democracy, something you can't touch, something you have to sit and you have to accept, and that's it. We can put in place an industrial policy which says, no, our economy is part of our society, and our society is a democratic society, and if we want to have a high-pay economy, no corporation is going to tell us we're not allowed to try. So what we have to do, there's no time to talk about this. The industrial policy paper in itself is insanely big. What we have to do is put in place the things which will help that economy to grow. A national investment bank. We've got to use procurement to build up big, strong industries. We need to support small, independent industries in this country and stop allowing the big manufacturers the big retailers to put them out of business. We have to start investing, because this is another shocking fact. Britain, if you take all the investment that's been made in Britain just now, that's public and private sector, all of it, it's not even zero. Now that sounds like that sounds impossible. No, but it is. The rate at which the infrastructure, public and private infrastructure of this country is declining is faster than the rate that we're investing in it. If Scotland becomes independent, we need to invest £5 billion a year just to get to the European average of the investment in our economy. And my God, that can't be our only hope to be average. We have to start investing in this country, and we have to do it properly. Because that austerity agenda, which tells you you can't borrow, you've got to live within your means, is a lie. No, we shouldn't be running deficits. Deficits are bad. I don't support Gordon Brown's use of borrowing to cover a faulty economy which wasn't given enough money to sustain public services. That's bad. We must get out of deficit on our revenue expenditure. But that's not the same thing as saying that for the long term we borrow because it works. And it does work. Every period when Britain's had its best economic outcomes, we were borrowing to invest. So whether that's a national company borrowing heavily to invest in housing, but based on the income that those houses are going to produce in rent over the next 50 years. Or whether it's borrowing for a national energy company, which is going to repay that borrowing through the guaranteed income that you get from energy generation. We're still going to be needing electricity over the next 20 years. That income is guaranteed. So the question is, do you want a foreign multinational company to capture all of that wealth on the basis of buying cheap turbines from China? Or are we going to bring it back here? Are we going to own our grid? Are we going to build our own energy infrastructure? Make our own turbines, make our own energy storage facilities and generation capacity in this country with our hands, because we can borrow to do that with no difficulty. There is no question that we will be able to repay anything that we borrow to do that. There are tens of thousands of extremely high quality jobs for people if we can just do these things. So if we can create a productive economy, if we can create that economy, we can create good jobs, and good jobs pay well. Jobs that pay well create prosperous citizens. Prosperous citizens pay their taxes, and that makes strong public finances, which we can invest in infrastructure and public services, which create the strong social cohesion that creates the country that people say they want to live in, a country that cares for each other, where you're part of a community with your neighbour. We can do all these things. There is a model which delivers this. Now, later this week, on Thursday, we've got a conference with well over 100 academics. It is insane, but we are trying to get a full 50 major reports out before this referendum. We're about halfway there. These reports cover everything, from tax and spend to budgeting to finance to housing, all the way through to social policy and how we treat our children. It's a full programme for the transformation of Scotland. We are going to have these 50 papers ready for early May, when we're going to write them up as one simple story, which says anyone that tells you that this is as good as it gets, wrong. Here's a tale, here's a story which will explain to you how we get from this place to somewhere better. So don't come back to me and tell me that only the broader shoulders of Britain is the option that we've got for transforming this country. And I can only say it again, 40 years of me first politics, and none of us won. And I'm sick of losing, and I'm sick of watching other people lose. I am not going to stand around waiting for Labour to get its act together and shake us all up in Britain like they promised they're going to do every 5 minutes and then roll straight back from 5 minutes later. If we can't change it... If they won't change it, we have to. Because this is a democracy. And if this is what we want, we can take it. So we have all the knowledge about what our people want. We have all the expertise to give them it. We have all the resources in this country necessary to make it happen. And we have an absolutely firm democratic majority to put that in place. The only thing that we need to create that Commonwealth Scotland is the capacity to do it. We need a yes vote to have the powers. And if we do, we can transform this country. It can be a country that puts all of us first. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Robin. Terrific. Now, the second speaker is Cat Boyd. Cat's from the Radical Independence Campaign, and she's a trade union activist. She's also a very busy person indeed, meetings and campaigns, conferences, etc., and so on. So, welcome, Cat.
Hi. Thanks very much for inviting me today. It's a real privilege to be here, and what a turnout. It's absolutely amazing. I've been involved in the Radical Independence Campaign, and what that is, right, well, it's not a political party, right? It's not a think tank. It's not just an organisation that puts on conferences. It's a broad coalition of pro-independence activists from the left of the political spectrum. Some people who are members of some party, some are members of no party, people who've never voted in their life, disaffected Labour voters, a really broad range of people. And the reason we set it up was to make sure that ideas about social justice and about a society that's nuclear free were getting out onto the streets. And we thought what our job is over this referendum is to convince as many people as possible that a vote for independence isn't just a vote in a referendum, but a vote for them, a vote for Scotland, and a vote for real change. So I guess, for me, what this referendum represents is it's not just a debate about the normal politics, the day-to-day stuff. It's not about Labour versus the SNP, and I get really frustrated when I see that all the time in the media, that seems to be how they're trying to frame it. For me, this is a debate for normal people, for ordinary people. And this referendum has opened up just a tiny little space, a wee chance for us, for people in Scotland, to move away from a system that has created despair and misery for so long. And it's a small gap in that political system that begins to open up for us in the referendum. The Radical Independence Campaign held a conference, our second conference, at the end of November last year. And the themes of that conference were summed up in so it was like 3 sections, and that's how the conference was structured. And we talked about failure, hope, and transformation. And that's kind of like that. These words sort of reflect my own journey and how I came to be a supporter for independence. And I want to start by saying, on that topic of failure, I think we need to be honest. Britain has failed. It has failed me, it's failed my generation, the generations that came before it, and it will continue to fail generations that come after it. And it's failed in 3 ways: economically, socially, and politically. I'm at the beginning of my journey to becoming a supporter for independence. I was 11 years old in 1997, and I've got this really clear memory of my dad. My dad's a long-time Labour Party member, a long-time Labour Party supporter, as are most of my family. And I remember when Tony Blair won in 1997, I remember my dad waking me up the next day and being like, "Oh, we won, the good guys are back in." Honestly. And he was honestly so full of hope and expectation at what was going to happen. And for us, that government came to represent something very, very different. And it's really significant, like the meetings that I've done in the last few weeks. It was 11 years ago on the 20th of March Just a couple of weeks ago, 11 years ago, when we saw the skies of Baghdad light up orange and our brothers and our sisters and our sons and our daughters sent to fight in a legal war. That was the time for me when I realised that Britain was failing. And that gap, that wee gap I was talking about that opens up with independence, that's a gap, it's a space for Scotland as an independent nation to stand internationally for peace and not for war. Today, we're 11 years on from that moment, and we've got another government at Westminster, and that's a government that's still intent on waging war. And that war they are waging is against ordinary people. That's the war that they're waging in Westminster today. And I said Britain's failed economically, and these are the things that Robin was talking about as well. Britain is one of the richest countries in the developed world, and it's also one of the most unequal societies. The Sunday Times Rich List, their wealth continues to grow even after the economic collapse of 2008, and average workers' wages rise 0.8%. There are attacks on social security, attacks on the welfare state, the privatisation of the NHS, these cuts being made on ordinary people because they have to pay for the mistakes made at the City of London. Now, this is something that Robin covered as well. The entire economic structure of Britain is failing, and Scotland's got a unique opportunity to move away from that economic model that's run on greed, debt, speculation, trading in derivatives, that kind of shadow economy, that emanates out the City of London. That type of economic system, basically what it's done is it's taken the wealth that's created from all over these islands, from everywhere, from Aberdeen to Liverpool. It takes all of the wealth created by normal people and pulls it right down into the City of London. It pulls it right down and makes that banking class, that unregulated banking class, even richer, and it makes all of us pay the brunt of the cuts of austerity. Now, Tony Benn was someone, for me, who I always found really inspiring, and I was really sad at his passing. I didn't always agree with him on his position on independence, but he said something I remember, and he said something about Britain that I thought was really telling. He said, "This country has an utter contempt for skill." It has an utter contempt for skill. And that was during the Thatcher years, when she made that model of finance capitalism, the bankers at the City of London, build up and build up. And all we saw was an utter contempt for skill. I was speaking to a woman just before the meeting started. We talked about Ravenscraig. And I remember Ravenscraig. I'm from Hamilton originally, and we used to live right high up in Hamilton. And I remember going over to the park. We could see right over, great skyline view, and all the neighbours, we all came out of our houses and stood on the top of a hill, and we watched it be demolished. We watched that fall. We watched that industry fall apart. And for me, in this moment, there is not one party at Westminster that is committed to changing the structure of the economy. There is not one party at Westminster that wants to make a productive economy, or that wants to say skill is a good thing, skill is a good thing, and we want to pay people well for the things that they make. There's not one party. And I think if we don't move now, and this is what I always say to people who are voting no, if we don't move now, if we don't vote yes, then that path of economic failure will continue. And some people say, we've got to remain together, united, we can win, we're better together. But I always say to them, no, united, we have achieved some of the worst regression in terms of social and economic equality. It's actually shameful that a country as rich as Britain has regressed so far. Robin also covered these things. I think we're on a similar page. We do work with the Commonwealth quite a lot. The other ways that Britain has failed socially. The standards of living in our country are terrible. They are terrible. It's the third highest housing costs in Europe, the highest rail prices in Europe, and the second worst in Europe for fuel poverty. As Robin said, we've got the least happy children in the developed world, and we've got some of the worst poverty in old age. And it's also failed politically, and I think this is a really important It's a really important thing for me that Britain's failed politically, because I've always really struggled at elections, because I'm always like, I don't know who to vote for, because I've got these ideas for change. And that's the referendum, for me, opens up a chance for real change. And Britain's failed politically. And I just want to explain exactly what I mean by that. People talk about public opinion, right? So you hear it in the newspapers all the time, the public, the general public, etc., etc. Well, let's look at the general public. And this is across the UK. 12-1 against the privatisation of the NHS. 67% in favour of a public Royal Mail. 66% backing rail nationalisation. 68% for nationalising energy companies. But no party at Westminster represents those views. No party at Westminster is putting those policies out there. And it is the system of British democracy that we've got a House of Lords, for God's sake. It's that system of British democracy that pulls always rightwards. It is that system that's stealing the chance for change for ordinary people. In September, we've got a chance, a real hope, a real chance to change the path that we're on about that economic failure, societal failure and political failure. And I honestly feel for the first time like I've got something to vote for. Austerity at home and a war on ordinary people and war abroad, these aren't the best things that we can expect. And I refuse to be told that us, the people in this room, are too wee, too poor and too stupid to succeed in changing the world. And, I see this all the time in the Scottish media, and they're always talking about, can you afford it? Not sure you've got enough wealth. Well, we're wealthy anyway, of course, as a nation. We've got resources and we've got people. But since when did politics become about how rich a nation is and not about how that wealth is distributed amongst its citizens? And that's the thing. Jimmy Reid once said, the untapped potential of our North Sea oil is nothing in comparison to the untapped potential of our people. And that's the spirit that I think is really, really important around this referendum. And regardless of the colour of the government at Westminster, it will always be at war with ordinary citizens. It only represents the interests of the rich. And if we vote yes, I think we're starting to win that argument. We will have to, fight for what we want, for the changes that we want to see. So we know that Britain's failed. We know that the referendum brings us hope. And I have this picture in my head of the things that I want to see. And I don't think, we're called the Radical Independence Campaign, but I don't think our ideas are that radical, to be honest. I don't think it's too much to ask for free childcare and well-paid, skilled jobs, a properly funded social security system. This is easily paid for. Of course it is. You don't need to be an academic or write a policy paper to know that if you had better taxation, you scrapped Trident and you stopped squandering resources, then these things are perfectly affordable. It's not a question of, balance in the books. It's a question of priorities. I refuse to accept that what we've got now is the best that we can accept. And it's given us this opportunity to go out and talk to people about that. The privilege of having the opportunity to go out and say to someone, what sort of country do you want, is incredible. It's something that's been really powerful. And to people who are thinking about voting no, it's not going to bring certainty. A future in the UK is uncertain. There's a European Union referendum, there's the rise of UKIP, all the parties at Westminster promise more cuts. There's nothing else on the table. And to those of us in this room, I think that's probably the majority who are voting yes. I think we should keep this in mind. And I want to be honest about it. I don't think we're going to get a landslide victory. I don't think we're going to, see the polls on September the 18th and it be 75% yes, 80% yes. I don't think it's going to be that. I don't care. I just want to tip it over the edge. Just tip it over. That's all I want. And everyone in this room who is voting yes, that's our role. I always feel quite humbled being asked to come and speak at things, but I'm by no means an expert. I don't pretend I've got all the answers. We've got a role to play. We've all got a role to play in convincing our friends, our colleagues, our families, our neighbours, get out, knock the doors, speak to people on the streets, in the supermarket, whatever it takes. And we have to ask ourselves, do we have what it takes? Do we have what it takes not just to win the referendum, but to win Scotland for its people? Because the yes vote on September the 18th is just the beginning for me. And at the heart of all this stuff, at the heart of all the meetings and the canvassing and the Yes campaign and the Radical Independence campaign and Commonweal and everything, it lies the conviction this isn't politics as normal. This isn't about mainstream political parties. It's about people. It's about people. The great thing about this movement for Yes is that we're building a movement that's bigger than the vote. We're building a movement that's bigger than the vote. And of course that's true physically. You know, we've got people internationally who are looking at us going, Scotland, show the way, show that there's another model, another way to do things. But it's more than that. Our movement is bigger than the vote because the referendum is only one day. It's just one day. Our movement is bigger than that vote because I know when we go to the ballot box and we've got that bit of paper in front of us, it doesn't say no, yes, and radical yes. It's just yes or no. But that's for me when the moment becomes real. That's when it becomes more exciting than it is just now. Because it's us in this room who will vote yes, and then it'll be us in this room that will shape the whole future of an entire nation. And I just want to finish on this. And it's something that Bernadette McAlpine said actually at our last conference. And before that conference, there was an article in the Herald about us, about the Radical Independence campaign. And it said, Radical Independence is the wild card in this referendum. And it said, if we could convince enough young people and working class people to go out and vote yes, then all bets are off. And I think looking at the polls just now, all bets are off. And our slogan was always, another Scotland is possible. But looking at the turnout in this room, the reaction I get when I go out canvassing, and those polls that are coming back and being fed back into our movement, that another Scotland isn't just possible, it's probable. And I think we should all remember that.
Well, our third speaker and final speaker is, before we open up to the wisdom of the Lanarkshire denizens, is Jim Sillars. He's a former Labour MP, of course, and former Deputy Leader of the SNP and author of a book you'll no doubt allude to, In Place of Fear 2. I just want to say one thing to Jim before he gets here. Jim, you don't need stilts to be head and shoulders above some political nyaffs.
Well, I'm really surprised that anybody's here tonight because according to Joanne Lamont, the leader of the Labour Party in Scotland, and I quote her from the STV debate with Nicola Sturgeon on the 25th of February, we are not genetically programmed to make political decisions in Scotland. Put politely, that means we're all thick. It also means that in Joanne's view, we are a unique nation because nobody else has got DNA that makes them programmed not to make political decisions. Quite a unique position for the leader of the Labour Party. Mind you, I'm not surprised because the other great statement Joanne made was to describe what we are doing with prescription charges, free bus passes for the elderly and everything as the something-for-nothing society. Now, I was interested in what Kat said, that our old man got somewhat excited when Blair was elected in 1997. When I was 8 years old, I remember my father and Mrs. Logan, a miner's wife, dancing up and down the path between our houses because Labour had won in 1945. And 8 years old, that's all I was. I knew something significant had happened in our lives. And of course, it did happen in our lives. Nobody needed to worry about paying for the doctor any longer. And the men who worked in the railway didn't work for private enterprise any longer, and it was the same with the miners. Now, I didn't stand up with glee in 1997 because I had served with Tony Blair in the House of Commons, and if ever there was a lightweight but a brilliant actor, it was him. What I want to do tonight is put our referendum campaign in its historical context. It's very important we do so, because, Kat, the United Kingdom or the British state is not rich. It is at the end of the English/British Empire, the final stages of decline. All empires face the same. They rise and they fall. Whether it's the Persian Empire, Alexander the Great, the Romans, the Portuguese, the Spanish, the French, and the English/British Empire, all will go the same way. Have you ever wondered why, on her Jubilee, the Queen sailed up the Thames in a wee boat, with the Duke of Edinburgh dressed as an Admiral of the Fleet? The reason is that in every other Jubilee, the monarch has reviewed the fleet. But so skint is the British state, there's no fleet to review any longer. They're building an aircraft carrier that they can't put aircraft on. Now, I'm ex-Royal Navy, so I know a thing or two about this. When you put a carrier group to sea, you've got an aircraft carrier surrounded by frigates and destroyers. Some of them are anti-submarine and some of them anti-aircraft, all to protect the aircraft carrier. But if you don't have aeroplanes on the aircraft carrier, it's in trouble, and I'll tell you why. Because the anti-aircraft destroyers and frigates only have a certain size of their mast, and the radar up there can't see beyond the horizon. And the missiles that come towards the aircraft carrier come from beyond the horizon. If you have aircraft flying at 20,000, 30,000 feet, their radar can see beyond the horizon. But if you don't have any aircraft on the aircraft carrier, then you know what happens. That's all an indication of the decline. When I joined the Royal Navy, we had a home fleet, Mediterranean fleet, Far East fleet, and a West Indies station. Now they'll be hard pushed to crew one aircraft carrier. This year, the government again will borrow over £100 billion. The UK national debt by round about 2016-17 will be £1.55 trillion. The debt interest they'll be required to pay for that will be more than they'll pay for defence and education put together. It'll be around about 75 to 78 billion pounds. That's what you're talking about in a country that's in decline. We will decline along with them. And when they tell us this is the best of both worlds, being in the UK with more power for our devolved parliament and those broad shoulders of the United Kingdom, what they're offering at the best is 40% control of the budget at Holyrood, which also means 60% is controlled elsewhere. And there ain't, as I've explained, no broad shoulders. There's just massive, massive debt. We are lucky. We are a nation, and we can escape from that. And this is the opportunity we have on the 18th of September. But Kat and Robin are right. What happens on the 19th of September and every day thereafter is what matters most. It is what we do with our country. Now, my wife calls me a grumpy grandpa. I don't think that's justified. And if she's watching in that web thing there, let me tell her it's definitely not justified. But I am an angry grandpa. I come out of retirement for this campaign because I've got 10 grandchildren and I've had to tell each of them. I always write to my grandchildren individually when they're leaving primary 7. I write a letter to them, giving them advice. And I've had to tell each of them, if Scotland votes no on the 18th of September, they must get the best qualifications they can in order to get out of our country, because that's the only way they'll have a decent standard of living and prosperity for them and their children and their grandchildren. Because this will remain a low-wage economy for all time coming, with high unemployment, high poverty, and dreadful inequality. I don't want to be able to tell my grandchildren that. I want to be able to tell them and everybody else's grandchildren, this is a country in which you can invest your skill and your talent and your time and your energy and build a community we can all be proud of and one that's prosperous. And how we do it was with a different economic model to the one that's failed the British state. We need to do, as Robin was saying, look at the resources of our country. And if you take the resources and you build wealth upon that, you're doing something that's there permanently. The greatest resource we have is in our people and in our children. And so the first priority must be what we do with education. And we don't have, although Mike Russell keeps saying it, it's not true, Mike. We don't have the finest world-class system in education. How can it possibly be when we've got 250,000 children in poverty? How can they possibly have a decent start and opportunity in education? In 1973, in the House of Commons Scottish Grand Committee, we discussed a document called Children Born to Fail. 250,000 Wains in poverty now are born to fail in 2014. We've got to attack that and turn it around. And we can do so without spending a single pound extra. We've got 32 education authorities, 32 bureaucracies, directors of education, in a country of 5 million people. Cut it down to 5 education authorities, and you transfer something like, out of the present budget, £500 million into the schools where it is in fact required. But we can do more. Is everybody in here aware that the independent private schools in Scotland get an 80% reduction in their council tax? Because under the Charities Act, they do some public good. If Fettes in Edinburgh, where Tony Blair was educated privately, has a council tax liability of £209,000, but it only pays £41,000. At the other side of our capital city, in a deprived area called Westerhales, the Westerhales School, Disney get the discount. It pays £261,000 in council tax. Now, if we have the audacity that an Iron Bevan instructed us to have, that means that you must think the way the establishment tells you not to think. And you must be able to do what the establishment tells you you can't do. Well, I looked up the Charities Act, And the only reason Wester Hailes and all the state schools in Scotland don't get that reduction is that they're paid by the minister. Well, with one sweep of the legislative pen, you can remove that inhibition and all our schools get the same. So without spending one single penny more, we can improve the education in our country and make it world class for the first time for a long time. We're all, I would imagine all, working class in here. Now, I live in middle class Edinburgh. I've got a middle class pension, let me confess. But I'm working class. Always have been, always will be. And there's a lesson the working class has learned, but to some extent has started to ignore. Whether or not we lead a good life depends entirely upon whether we can sell our labour. If we cannot sell our labour, we're in a fix and we're subject to the state. We have to ask for benefits. And today, of course, if you miss an appointment at the job centre, you're sanctioned, benefits are withdrawn, and you can become destitute. The key issue for the working class is whether or not we can create an economy into which we can sell our labour. And what determines that is the policy of full employment. I heard on the television today them talking about 5% unemployment, something to be joyous about. That means thousands and thousands of Scottish citizens with no jobs and no hope whatsoever. So the first thing we have to do when we become independent, when we've got the power to do so, is raise the flag that was raised in 1945, the flag of full employment. The Attlee government had no embarrassment about arguing for full employment because that generation knew that fundamental principle. You can sell your labour or you can't sell your labour, and that determines whether or not you have a decent way of life. How do we do that? We start by creating jobs, looking at the resources and looking at the need in our society. We've 157,000 families on the housing waiting list. There's only one way to solve that: build houses. If you don't build houses, they remain in the waiting list. And if you build houses, 25,000, 30,000 a year, somebody's got to quarry the sand, somebody's got to make the cement, somebody's got to make the bricks, somebody's got to transport them to the site, and journeymen and apprentices have got to put them together, and plumbers and slaters and joiners have got to create houses. And you've created work right along that chain. How do we pay for it? Well, one of the ways is to look at one of the gifts that John Major and Gordon Brown left to this society, called the Private Finance Initiative. They're going to take something like 22 billion out of our pockets in the decades ahead. What I argue, and I've argued it in the book, is we bring them in and we tell them we want to renegotiate all these PFI contracts. By the way, there is absolutely nothing radical in renegotiating a commercial contract. It's done every day in the week in commerce. If one partner in a contract finds themselves in a different position to when the contract was established, then they seek renegotiation. Now these folk will come in and say, no, we don't want to. And it's quite simple. You say, well, there's no problem. We will now pay you 1 year in arrears, and we'll use that money to build houses. But by the way, we're going to tax you at 30% on the PFI contract, so whether you like it or no, now you can do that if you've got the power. Nothing stops you if you've got the power. And the only thing that will stop us having the power to do that kind of thing is if we vote no on the 18th of September. Then there's the small, it's already been mentioned, Robin, the number of small, medium-sized enterprises we've got. We've got almost 340,000 small, medium-sized companies in Scotland who get a very bad deal from the banks. We can set up a special bank for them. In fact, it would have been far better doing that than trying to bail out Fred the Shed and RBS. But we can set up a small, medium-sized enterprise bank. One of the cafes I go to, go for a coffee with one of my grandsons. And that lady would like a limited amount of money to expand. Maybe, say, £25,000. She can't get it. No, there's no bonus in that for the banks. No one. I said to her, phone them up and ask for 20 million. You'll get an interview. You'll not get the 20 million, of course. But that's the kind of bank we need for those small, medium-sized companies. Just think about it. If half of them employed one person more at a decent wage, we're a long way towards creating that full employment. Then there's the other resource that we're not supposed to talk about, and that's oil. I am quite convinced that Better Together goes down on its collective knees night after night after night and prays to God that a hole will open up in the North Sea and the oil will gush away. That would really solve the problem of the debate over oil. We have been, as a Scottish nation, in a prison of lies over the oil. I remember Janie Buchan, who was a Labour MEP, great luminary in the Labour Party, on television, saying it can't be Scotland's oil because we didn't put it there. Harry Selby, who was Margot's opponent, said exactly the same thing, only he called it tartan oil. Now, when I tell my friends in the Arab world that, they fall about laughing. And they say, we didn't put it there either, but by God. One of the strange things about oil in the Scottish nation is that we don't know anything about it. We know about shipbuilding, we know about steel making, we know about coal mining, but our knowledge as a nation of the North Sea oil industry is almost zilch. All the arguments have been how much tax revenue we get. Well, there's a blog written by a chap called Stuart Darling, nothing to do with Alistair. And it's worth reading part of this blog. The debate around oil and gas is one of the most peculiar aspects of Scottish life. The UK political parties and media have made sure the Scottish psyche is such that oil and gas might tick along for a while, but the tide won't flow much longer. And thinking anything else is a high-risk strategy. It's going to run out, so don't think about anything else. Inexplicably, the oil and gas sector was not mentioned once as a possible career at any point during my high school education or during my 4 years studying maths and physics at Glasgow University. As the story goes for thousands of Scots, particularly in the Central Belt, home to one of the world's most technologically advanced industries, and yet oblivious to the potential opportunities that this brings directly to them. And he says, last November, I was in the US, and there was an advert on TV about how the oil and gas sector was helping the economic recovery with an overview of the thousands of new jobs being created. Such high-profile promotion of the sector is almost unthinkable in the UK. For some reason, the positive impact of the industry is kept on a need-to-know basis. And that means the Scots need not to know. The other night in Edinburgh at a meeting, somebody to the left of me, to be fair to him, said, "You want a Scottish National Oil Corporation. I want to nationalise the whole of the North Sea." I told him we don't have the human capacity to do that. And he said to me, "You're right. There are thousands of workers in the North Sea. They'll ken what to do." But of course they don't, because they go onto a rig, and there's 570 rigs in the North Sea. They go onto a rig, they don't meet other folk in the other rigs, and when they land at Aberdeen, they disperse home. When we had a steel industry in Motherwell, we had the clubs and the pubs and a lot of people together who would talk about their industry and therefore knew it, the same way mining and shipbuilding. We don't have that in the oil industry. When Thatcher destroyed the British National Oil Corporation, she did so for two reasons. One was she didn't like anything public. The other was that was a window for the nation into what was happening in the North Sea. That window closed, and we don't know a great deal about it. Just think of this. We are 5 million people. Oil for 5 million people at 1.4 million barrels a day is more valuable than it is for 60 million people. We can do more with that oil. And I'm thinking not just of the revenues. I want a Scottish National Oil Corporation. As Robin says, we can borrow to buy oil fields in the North Sea. We can demand a share for the Scottish nation for every project. In Denmark, when they issue a licence, they want 20% in the project for the Danish nation. I'm much more moderate than that. I said 15. But the important thing is, we would have not just a share of the tax revenues, but of the wealth from the oil itself. And think what we can do with the black stuff. Let's just take a small portion of the oil as it passes through the refinery at Grangemouth and use it to lower the cost of petrol, diesel and aircraft jet fuel. Think of what that would do. That's a resource. It puts more money in the hands of families to spend in the locality. It makes our transport industry the most competitive in Europe. And it makes our tourist industry one of the best going, because a lot of our tourism comes from the north of England. Man, wife, 2 wains in the family car. They hardly go north of the Glasgow-Edinburgh line because of the cost of fuel as you go up into the Highlands. Think what that policy can do to the Scottish tourist industry and the creation of more wealth and more jobs. That's the kind of thing we can do when we're on our own, making our own policies. There's not a snowball's chance in hell of anything like that happening if we remain part of the United Kingdom. Then I just want to say a word on equality. I want, when we are independent, in the public sector, everybody working in it and everybody supplying it to get the living wage. And I want, during a 5-year transition period, for the living wage to become mandatory in the private sector as well. But I want to go further than that. I want to see a society in which the person at the top in the public sector gets no more than 13 times what the person at the bottom in the public sector gets. And somebody said to me at a meeting, "Well, are they top folk? They'll go." I said, "Well, let them." And then I said, "Where are they going to go?" There are plenty of us to fill the jobs if necessary. I am sick and tired of reading someone at the top in the public sector getting a bonus for doing the highly paid job they're supposed to do in the very first place, and the 13-to-1 ratio will bring that to an end. Can I finish by saying this? The reason that I came out of retirement and took part in this campaign is that I see the opportunity for the Scottish working class to finally find its way ahead under its own steam. We are a very talented people, and yet somehow or other we buy the idea that we are inadequate. We are talented people. I want to energise the Scottish working class, to make them understand the latent power that they've had for years and turn that latent power into real power when we are an independent country. There's an old miner in Netherthird, way back in Cumnock in 1979, who stood up at a meeting I was at, and he said the greatest problem facing the Scottish working class is that all our socialist dreams have been destroyed by the London connection. Well, we can cut that connection, and the Scottish working class can stop dreaming, and we can start turning it into a reality. We can create a better country for our children and our grandchildren. The referendum on the 18th September can be summed up in a short phrase. It is about power. Whether we exercise power or whether power is exercised over us. Between 7 o'clock in the morning and 10 p.m. on the 18th of September, you and me and everybody with a vote in our country is sovereign. We as a nation have sovereign power in our hands. For the first time ever, at 1 minute past 10, have we kept it or have we given it away? And if we've kept it, there'll be no more dreaming. There'll be reality of a better way of life for all of our people.